We're live. We are live. Welcome everybody on LinkedIn, and I'm streaming on Facebook and YouTube. If you happen to be there, welcome to you too. We are excited today. I decided to do intros live today. I am really looking forward to having a panel conversation with 5 of the wonderful people I have had on and interviewed or had a conversation with over the last 10 weeks. And I'm very grateful that they've made time to join us again today to talk about the modern leadership, but more importantly, the future of leadership. So with the changes we're all going through at the moment, there's a lot of conversations going on about what needs to happen in terms of changes or tweaks to leadership. What are some of the themes? What are some of the things that need to happen to engage remote teams? All of those things. So we are here to converse about that. I'll firstly address the elephant in the room, and that is that I am the only female on the call today, not by for any other reason than the other females I invited along were unfortunately busy. This was a last minute attempt to bring together the group. So it is not indicative of how I roll or how we roll. And certainly a lot of the people here have been absolutely instrumental in the approach to diversity in the workplace, and perhaps something we can talk about while we're here as well. So welcome to Chris again. So Chris is joining us. He was my number 1 interview, or my first interview on the live series. So welcome back. Pat Devlin is joining us from Aruba. And again, Pat's, everybody here has been live with me already once. I'm gluttons for punishment, so they've decided to come back for some more. And Carl Seiss, welcome back. Nick Varikios, thank you again for joining us again. Wonderful to have you. And Ken Bowl again from Cisco. So welcome everybody. Now, I will ask that anybody who is on live with us gets involved with the conversation. We'd rather not be Ignite TV. We'd rather be a conversation. So if you have any insights, any comments, any questions, we would love it if you could put those into the chat, and I will do my best to facilitate that throughout the conversation. And we will be going for an hour today. So hopefully you've got your coffee, your tea, whatever it is that you're drinking, and you are ready to roll. So hopefully we're hitting 11:30 now, so let's get into it. So I noticed that between us we have in excess probably of 150 years of experience in the workforce, most of us in IT technology, and a lot of that has been in leadership, which is fabulous. So hats off to us all, but not one of us really has any experience in what leadership is going to look like in the future, obviously. So a little bit of our conversation today, I'd love if you could just sort of look into your crystal balls and share your insights and thoughts, and also love your insights and thoughts into what you've experienced, what you've seen, what lessons you've learned, etc. But so I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that there is going to be much difference in leadership moving forward? So is it a conversation that is changing, or is it more of the same? Who will I throw to first, just to start the conversation? Let's go. We'll start with Chris. On my screen, Chris is next. So yeah.
Sure. Look, I think some of the tried and tested principles of leadership won't change. You see over history that great leaders existed hundreds of years ago. What has changed, though, is and looking forward, certainly the technology, the mediums and the immediacy of how we connect and communicate are becoming more complex. And particularly, what we've seen this year, I think it's really tested leadership in the ability of leaders to be able to connect with people in ways that they're probably not used to, right? So, having to do it via what we're doing right now. But I think, and we'll unpack, I'm sure, some of the principles of leadership. But I do think that those tried and tested principles will remain for going forward. It's just really the mediums in which we're having to operate.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Ken.
You're spot on there, Chris. But I also feel things aren't getting any easier for leaders. There's more to consider, more to be involved in. Our employees are sort of looking for leadership, not just on the day job, but also, I think, addressing some of the social issues and participating in some of the bigger conversations. And companies are being brought in to participate in some of these debates. And I think that's been really interesting. And so the one thing that I sense about leadership going forward is, none of us can be experts across the whole host of the topics. So get friendly with HR, get friendly with other experts in our firms and external, because we can't be across everything. And my own personal experience, both this year and previously, was don't try and be the expert in all matters, but really rely on and tap into internal and external networks. And I think that's going to be a big opportunity moving forward.
Yeah. Isn't it? They say it takes a village. So yeah, same concept. Pat, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, Pat.
So interesting times. I feel like Ken's kind of touched on something really interesting there, in that this year we've had companies, and not just companies, I think, but everybody's kind of participating in leadership discussions on a world stage. We've watched terrible leadership in action, like on a global stage, and everybody's had this voice, even for a leadership debate that we don't necessarily have a direct stake in. And it's fascinating, but I think the takeaway is you've seen people fail, and there's less of a perception of infallibility of leadership. So although there's some awful things that happen, there's a positive in that we've suddenly seen there is an ability to deal with fallibility. There is ability for people to participate in a conversation and give feedback to leadership. I think one of the things I was really interested in, and it's very topical right now, is the way military leadership works. We've often looked to that, for guidance for the way we run corporations. There's loads of kind of military analogies, and there's obviously a lot in our news right now about military leadership and its successes and failures. Over the years, I've worked with a bunch of folks who had their first career in the military, and I kind of like to stay connected because they're really interested in the way they connect with the world and the way they translate that experience to corporate. And I saw a blog written recently where someone was asking a question saying, should I chase money, or, what is it I should chase? I'm out of the military. I never really got paid well. And the comment was, when you were serving, you had a mission, and the mission was all important. You never counted what you got paid on a day. It was never about the money. It was about the mission. And if you can find another mission, then you're going to be happy and successful. It's not about chasing one thing. And I think, for all the lessons we've got from failure this year, one of the things we can take away as leaders is if we can create a mission, we don't have to fight hard and chip away at every dollar. We've obviously got to do our best to make sure our people are rewarded. But a mission is what will engage people. And we don't have to be perfect, but if we can lead the mission, people will follow us and lift us up when we fall if they're believers in the mission. It's less about an individual as a leader and more about the mission. So that's my big takeaway from this year.
And I think Nick's probably got something to say on this, because this is something that came up in our conversation a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I struggle with the idea of leadership now being challenged in terms of it looking forward. That's what leaders do. That's what we do. High impact variables happen, and we've got to rearrange ourselves to be able to take a movement, a company, a bunch of people, whatever, forward. That's what we do. So nothing's really changed. I find the forward-thinking leadership, narrative being almost oxymoron, because what's getting challenged right now is a whole bunch of people who were in a management position, not necessarily a leadership position, and are babysitting that responsibility until things change while everyone else moves it around. And what we've got is a whole bunch of like I said, high impact variables that are saying, well, it's going to work like this right now. How do I adjust? How do I move? How do I change? Show them where to look, because that's what we do. But don't tell them what to see, because that's their value. That's their purpose. That's the way that they can actually stay valuable for an organization. And that has never changed. That's going to stay. But we are sitting right now in a situation where so many what would have been called leaders are just babysitting that responsibility and waiting for things to settle down while everything else like gets taken further. And I know I'm taking it from an entrepreneurial perspective, but that's all I have, because that's all I am. But I really do believe that it's getting overhyped. Nothing's really different. We just have to like keep using the variables and getting people to look forward in a way that's going to serve their purpose, their ability to shine, their ability to do amazing things, because the chances have never been bigger. The chances to change, the chances to actually throw antiquated situations away and really start to make a difference has never been better. Never been better. It's what I call chances of bliss. It's never been better.
Yeah. Carl.
But can I just add, a lot of those comments which were made resonate extremely loudly with me as well. But I just want to add that I think, and I think Pat started making the comment, I want to grab onto something he said and say that I don't think there's ever been a time when authenticity, integrity, and followership is more important. One of the things, and I'm going to grab onto Pat's thing, one of the things that bothers me about the world and some of the disruption we've had and some of the poor examples that Pat referred to is that it's set a new something that I don't think is a particularly good example. I know as a father of two, I've got two kids, and I look at my 19-year-old daughter and I try and understand her heroes and trying to understand what she wants to aspire to. And it saddens me a little bit. And I think it's incumbent on the rest of us to really take this opportunity to step back up. And as the opportunity presents, overbalance the importance of authenticity, overbalance the importance of integrity, and give people a sense that it's okay to do the right thing, but it's also okay to do the wrong thing as long as it's ethical. And I apologise if it sounds a bit simplistic, but I think people in this environment want to know that they're safe. Even when there's change, they want to know that they can rely on someone who's courageous enough to be humble and capable of giving more of themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I'm just going to absolutely acknowledge everything that everyone said, and I am in the process, and I'm a little bit behind, but I'm putting together a document which talks about a lot of these things, which I'm going to share with people who want it from this today. And Nick, what you were saying there, to an extent, we've just got to kind of step up. I think there's what you were saying is there are some great leaders. There are some people in leadership roles who perhaps need to look at, possibly stepping up a little bit in terms of what they need to do moving forward. So it is a little bit of a reckoning.
What Carl would say, it's more accountability than stepping up. It's ethical accountability is on display right now.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to have a quick check of the comments, because there are lots of comments coming through. Thank you so much, everybody. Martin was talking about, to my comment at the beginning about diversity. You have a panel of allies. Diversity, equity and inclusion goals are more meaningful when allies become part of the discussion. So he talks a lot. Martin is a diversity speaker, and he talks a lot about having, that we're all allies in this. And so it should be a collective as opposed to necessarily, separate situations. So thank you for that, Martin. There's a lot of thank yous for doing this to everybody. Christine, it's jumping around. I'm eyeing to become an inspiring and motivating leader with positive energy. Thanks for instigating this discussion. So thank you to everyone. And there's a message for Carl: authenticity and integrity lead to followership for sure. So yeah, thank you for including yourselves in this. And I would love you all to continue adding value to the conversation, because as I said, we don't have crystal balls. And so this is really an open discussion so that we can sort of align moving forward. So that's fantastic. So now I've just done that, and I had another segue from what we were just saying to move into, but I've lost it. So that was it. One of the things that I think comes up here is around self-leadership. So, it's two things. One, I think, we've got this mental health discussion with the way that things are at the moment, and probably should always have had more than we have had, although it's certainly been a theme for some companies to take care of. So there's the mental health element, and then there's also the self-leadership. So, and that is really accountability and all the things we've been talking about. Do you think that leaders can be a little bit forgotten in all of this in terms of the mental health, and how much of that is their responsibility versus the business's responsibility? Because leaders are the ones who are expected to deliver all of this, but what about the leaders? Pat?
I was thinking this about, we had a kind of quick chat before, but I was thinking about this morning, actually, as if anyone knows me, I've got 1 million kids. I have 5, but very broad spectrum of ages from 5 up to 22. And I was watching one of my older kids step in to look after someone who was really hurting. And it reminded me, and I'll come back to when this comes back to leadership in a sec, but it reminded me of a time when I was going through a really dark period in my own life. And the people who helped me out were my 2 boys, who are now 20 and 22. And they were they're in their teens at the time. And I felt awful because I felt like I was burdening my teenage children who had enough problems in their life with my own, but I didn't ask them for help. They saw some vulnerability and stepped in and helped out. And I think there's a leadership lesson in that for a long time as a parent, I felt like I had to be invulnerable. It wasn't my kids' job to look after me. I had to show them absolute strength. And I had this moment, and I was thinking about it today because my teenage daughter was pulling someone else out of some strife, thinking, actually, that moment of vulnerability is where it all comes together. You've taught, and they've got an ability to step into a breach, and you see what you've created. And I think as business leaders, we often think we're not allowed to be vulnerable. We're not allowed to show any weakness to our people. We have to show them, we're absolutely infallible and tough, and nothing can mess with us. And a lot of it's important to be that sometimes, but I think there's an opportunity to show some vulnerability and to allow people in. Now, you can't be leaning on everybody all the time and begging for everybody's help, but making them part of the process and part of your network as much as you're part of theirs, I think there's a real opportunity. And if you're at the top of a chain and there's not a lot else in country, it can be very lonely. And if you don't let people in, you have to deal with it all on your own. So unless you've got another network to lean on, you're in trouble. And these people are going through it with you. They know everything that's going on. They're part of your everyday. A little bit of vulnerability goes a really long way, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Beck, we spoke about this. We spoke about this when you and I had our chat last time, and I remember this being a huge topic, not only in that conversation, but I know in some of your blogs you've spoken about this topic, and I'm so grateful for your leadership over this, because I think mental health or mental health fitness is an enduring responsibility for us as leaders. I can't think of a more important responsibility. I love what Pat said, but I can't think of a more important thing as leaders to give people a safe harbour. And I won't mention the city I'm in at the moment, but I was with one of my team yesterday who felt open enough to actually open up about a particular challenge in their situation. And I love that. And I think as leaders, we've got to take the opportunity where it's appropriate to celebrate that boldness, that I need help or I'm not okay. And as leaders, there's a bunch of tools at our disposal. And I think, Beck, we've all been around a few years. Where we are today versus where we were 10 years ago, I think we're streets ahead, but we've still got a long way to go. And we shouldn't just wait for the health minister or the prime minister to come up with the answers. As leaders, I think we need to also step up and take those opportunities to give our community the kind of support and the kind of environment that makes this better.
Yeah.
Hey, Beck, that's a good one. And even just my own personal experience this year, I mean, living in Melbourne, geez, what a fantastic year we've had. I had to really sort of kick myself into gear. It wasn't easy. There were times where we were just ground down, and to then be able to pick yourself up, to be able to pick up the team and lead the team with positive energy, it wasn't always easy. So I had to sort of reflect on and get myself into a space where I could be my best. And this is the same whether you're a leader or an individual contributor, any end of the spectrum. You know, work out how you get yourself to your best, where you perform at your best, and health and well-being became a really key focus for us. So just getting out of these caves that we found ourselves in, video call after video call. So we had to work on that personally, and I think it's something that we still have to work on, because it's a different, and I think it's a more difficult and potentially mentally exhausting work environment if we don't right pace it and right size it. And I found just the benefit. I mean, I believe life is a contact sport. I mean, we're in the tech industry, everyone, but God, you know, it's about face to face as well. And I got great energy at the depths of the lockdown just by going for a walk with a friend down the street. And it reminded me how important that is. And we had to break out of this virtual world. So, yeah, I think, and the way that then flows and the way you support the team. We were lucky because large companies are blessed with global health and wellbeing programs. So for smaller firms, how you can tap into that sort of capability is incredibly important.
Yeah. I love Chris's input on this, actually, because Chris is working with startups and smaller organisations. What sort of impact do you think you've seen in that? And it's harder potentially for small companies who don't have that support infrastructure to reach out and get help. What's your sort of thought?
This has been a really interesting year. You know, I work with 7 tech companies. I've worked in big organizations like Microsoft, and there is a lot of support infrastructure in place in those organizations. You know, I've had situations this year when COVID hit. One of the companies I'm involved with, we had to let go a third of the workforce within a week, with 2 months of operating cash left because we're in the middle of a cap raise and everything fell through. My role these days is more mentoring and coaching leaders. And, you know, I was making calls on weekend, making sure people are okay, because the mental health across my group alone, I had 3 of the 7. I wasn't sure they were going to get through the year, to be honest. Because when you're in tech, typically, you know, in the space I'm involved in, SaaS businesses, you're operating at a loss. You know, you're injecting capital to build scale, ideally to get to cash flow break even and profitability over a journey. And some of the companies I'm involved with are profitable and they got through, but even still, you know, all of the same issues that the guys on this call are dealing with in terms of staff working at home. You know, we've had some pretty horrendous situations with, you know, young people that are in call centers that, you know, they feed off each other socially in those environments, and suddenly they're living on their own, or they're in a share accommodation trying to work from home day in, day out. I mean, Melbourne, you know, I mean, it's been a real eye opener in terms of the role that leaders have had to play. And look, you know, I'm happy to say that I've seen some really, really good examples of strong leadership across the group I work with, where that was recognised early and we had to sort of get through and really support the teams that work for us. And happy to say all the companies I'm involved with have got through. You know, we're coming out the other side stronger. I've certainly learned a lot myself in terms, you know, it's great when you're with a tech company that's going from strength to strength and doing really well, and it's exciting and it's energizing. And then you hit a crisis, and then suddenly it's just all hands to the pump, and it's been a pretty stressful year. So I'm looking forward to a break, and I hope everyone out there who's had similar experiences are going to have some time out with family and reflect on what's been, you know, a bloody tough year. So yeah, this really resonates with me at a personal level.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it's breadth of insight. Nick, did you want? I feel like you've missed out on that conversation.
Well, I'm not sure where to go here with this one, because some of you may know, Rebecca, you do know, but I do a lot of crisis counselling work.
Yeah.
And this year was an interesting one. You know, I just, for the audience, I get the worst. You know, when they've already tried to kill themselves once or twice, and I get those. And the common denominator is a lack of purpose. Basically, it's an inability to be able to execute on what you want to do as a human being, but you're surrounded by an operating committee in your head who doesn't matter who it is, that says, you've got to do this, you've got to do this, and you can't find a purpose. So once you bring them back into a situation, as leaders, and this is 108 people I had to deal with that had to sleep well on my watch, and in every single time, thank God, touch wood, they're all doing okay now. But, every one of them had to separate themselves away from what was expected of them and start going into where they wanted to go. And this is what I mean by show people, in leadership, show people where to look, but not what to see, because that's where they can actually feel purposeful. No one ever felt stressed by having too much to do or too little to do. The only time you ever feel stressed is if you feel a lack of purpose, and you feel, you don't realize that you're actually not contributing to what you want to do. And bring us as leaders, bringing them back into that, and also making them understand in the overall picture in a corporate world, let alone a personal world, in a corporate world, that we're all just walking each other home, and everyone's got a job to do. Everyone's got something to bring home. And when the result comes, they feel great. But if you set people up for ridiculous, results because someone said so, it's always the person that didn't make the result that gets scrutinized, as opposed to the result itself. Why don't we look at that? That might have been full of shit, rather than the person who did everything they possibly could. Suddenly they feel useful because they realize they achieved something, as opposed to a number that was unachievable. And outside of the business world, what do you really want to do? What your mum and dad said that you should do, or what you really want to go off and do? And being able to bring people back to that today, I've felt, I've been doing this for 30 years, with the work that I do with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but this has felt easier than ever to be able to do that, because people have put their hands up and said, what, I've fucking had it.
So thank you. That's it's such an important conversation, and I don't think you can have this conversation enough. And there's probably two things that just came up for me through listening to you all, is just going back again to the importance of authenticity, the importance of humility, and we as leaders, you need to be modeling the behavior that you want from your people, and you need to be showing them that it's okay not to be okay, and to speak up when that's the case. And if you're, and of course they want certainty from you, but there's no harm in being a little bit honest. If you have to take a day out because you just need downtime and you're managing yourself, then you show them that's how you do it. So not only is it the right thing for you to do for yourself, but it's a really good thing to do for the people that you're leading, to model for them what it means to actually take some responsibility for self-care as well, and that's okay. And yeah, I think so that was one thing that just came up for me. The other thing I was saying is that
the idea of wrong is also, questionable, because you're not wrong. You just, in most instances, early in a process, we just need to change. What served no longer serves. Yeah. And also, if the business plan is wrong, that's on us. Yeah. We've got to shift that. It's not on them.
And so
we're just using alternative facts.
Yeah.
Isn't that the phrase from 2020?
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
I said we're just using alternative facts. I'm just.
Yeah. And the thing is as well is the value. If I just add from a, and this is just my coaching hat coming in, but the value of acknowledgement and gratitude, huge, absolutely huge. So even if the numbers aren't looking good, or if the result hasn't been achieved, what were the steps? What were the things that they did that you can acknowledge them for? What were the behaviors that, it could even be, listen, I want to acknowledge you for when you spoke up and said that you weren't okay, or whatever it is. So I just, the power of acknowledgement and gratitude is phenomenal. And I think even putting that, for leaders moving forward, just if you haven't done a lot of that, or even if you have, do more of it. And it's just such a powerful tool, and it will enable, it'll enable so many things, which I won't go into here, but yeah. So again, that's really important.
Actually, Beck, that's one that I've sort of always struggled with over the years, is that you aren't your results.
Yeah.
If you have a bad quarter, or you make a bad decision, that's going to happen, right? We're not perfect, and it's important as leaders that that we don't wear that on our sleeve too much. That we're consistent, and that we're still bringing the energy. Because if we're all down and out, then that's not a good situation. So, yeah, I used to wear it on the sleeve a little bit too much, and I even found myself a little bit that this year. It's all good when things are up and the results and the business is performing, but when it's tougher, I definitely think the transparency, the being real, the team just want the facts, and if you put the situation on the table, then everybody rallies to help solve the situation. If the minute you start hiding and being guarded with more of the information, that's when you don't get the full team enlisted into solving the challenge. So really seen that this year. Hey, by the way, with Nick, I mean, what Nick was touching on is also just triggers another point that I wanted to make, which is a lot of us, myself included, have got more on the STEM side of the engineering and sciences, and leadership's all about people. So the social sciences aspect is very important, and that's difficult in the tech industry predominantly because we're more from the STEM side. So I think a lot of us have to really embrace and learn, a dedication to lifelong learning or partnership with those who can bring those skills and knowledge and experience to the table. I think that's incredibly important, and the social sciences is probably even more important than the traditional STEM fields that we've all come from as we get into future and current leadership.
Yeah.
Ken, if you don't mind me saying, on top of what you said just then, I don't think in our industry there's ever been a time when there's more opportunities for people to take advantage of communities and areas to develop themselves, not only in traditional development, but to learn from others through mentorships, both mentoring and being a mentee, and also taking the opportunity to join organisations. We've got a number of them in IT that are terrific for bringing people together and taking advantage of mutual energy, but also developing the areas that you spoke about, not the technical skills, but the softer emotional skills, which, Beck, we haven't touched on this today, but EQ's never been more important than it is right now. I know that's an oft-used word, but I think it talks to the point previously made. But I strongly agree with what Ken said. I think luckily I think our industry and our community is getting better at this. I'd like to think so.
I think it's EQ and social intelligence as well. So they're both really, really important right now. Absolutely. And yeah, I'm just going to give a quick plug to the value of having coaches. It's such a powerful tool and something that a lot of people haven't necessarily thought of in the past. And I believe part of any well-being program should be the access to, some form of coaching. If you can't do that, then mentoring certainly as well. So yeah, that's really important. Yeah.
Hey, Beck, I know I keep butting in here, but I think you and I might have touched on this as well. One of the other things that I've been working on this year is to myself be a better coach. Right. Being the beneficiary of some wonderful coaches over the years, but recognizing that myself, I've been a bit of a shitty coach, quite frankly, to my team and some of my senior leaders. So, working on that, still working on it.
And there you go, humble, authentic, and acknowledging yourself and where you're working. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's so important.
I sit there and listen to you guys, just like I have when I've listened to some of the other people, and especially let's acknowledge the amazing females that have been on this program. And I always realise how little I know. But Ken, you did mention you're not your results. But in celebration, you are what you achieve, and that bit that's the bit, that's the authenticity of being able to say, yeah, you're going, you're moving, you're on, and I'm your biggest fan. Like, am I your coach? Am I your biggest fan? Sometimes as leaders, we've got to play around with that one. And Carl, you're probably one of the nicest human beings I've ever met in my life. And you know what you're saying in terms of that community is so important, because we are just walking each other home. And if we know that, it's the only way we can actually lead, because you can't lead an empty space. Right?
Yeah,
Well said.
that's so true. Yeah. And so sorry, I'll just check the chat box again. There's so many long comments in here, so I won't read them all out, but a lot of them are around the authentic conversation, the being humble. So Amit, I'm just seeing if that is a question. 2020 tested all companies' HR policies, ways of working from home, changes to their processes, etc. This is true. This is another element that is important. We've all done well, and year 2021 will be a better year with lots of opportunities. Too right, it will. I'm excited. As a country, Australia has done well compared to the rest of the world. Where the second wave is bringing havoc. Yeah. So congratulations to us. Hats off to us. And you know, now it's a question of keeping it great and making it greater moving forward, I think. And that's, you know, part of that responsibility as in business is leadership, or in anywhere is leadership. So some of these are coming through with LinkedIn users. Sorry if I can't name you, but that's just another thank you for the conversation. Stephen has said, perhaps, Carl, there has been a suppressed demand for EQ and social, and now we realise how this is important to our survival and growth. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is really important. And that's a great segue into the next thing I was going to raise is, so for the future, what are the key things you think, you know, how do we manage these remote workforces? These, you know, some of them are going to, I think, become global workforces in a bigger way. So teams will become more globalized. How do we manage that? And then the hybrid nature of some organizations that's going to be 2021.
Beck, I'd like to have a crack at that. I think it's all too easy. Whilst video tools are fantastic and have allowed us all to, on occasion, feel more productive, I think we've got to recognise that it can be quite transactional to be, if any of us are spending a bunch of hours every day on Teams or Zoom calls and nothing much else, we can feel like at the end of the day either quite hollow or quite spent. I think we again have to think about being kind to ourselves and being kind to our people and looking for whatever version of offline looks like in a virtual sense. And I know it's not always possible to travel, and it won't be possible to travel the way we knew, but to find a way of getting some offline time and some time for people to feel like it's not just, oh, Pat, hi, Pat, what's your numbers? How are we going today? Oh, Pat, quick, I need to know now. To a conversation that becomes more compassionate and more inclusive and more looking for those opportunities to have other conversations. I speak to a lot of people all the time who say they're tired because they're finding themselves in front of these boxes all day long. I think we've got to think about that in the context of what's to come.
Yeah. Pat?
Well, something we were talking about prior, I think we can kind of connect. You mentioned at the start, you know, we've got how many years of leadership experience between us? Something like 1 million or something. Yeah. But it's and no experience dealing with what's coming next. But you know what we've got is we've got a group of people who do have experience with what's coming next because they're building it for us. And so, you know, we talked a little bit about the millennial experience and what it's like. And there's an incredible amount of negativity around, you know, millennials in the workforce. But actually they're the group more than anyone who knows what's coming next because they're building it. Like we're building products and services to service them as the biggest consumers. And so they're kind of like these, you know, canaries in the coal mine telling us what's going to work and what's not. And if we suffocate them, we're in a world of hurt. They're our customers going forward. And it's, I always bring back my parenting experience because I feel like that's the thing that's given me the most experience in managing people. But if you look at the way teenagers now and our millennial workers deal with each other, I think they're growing up in a world where they understand each other much better than we did growing up. they're much more socially aware of everything that's going on in each other's lives. And that has incredible positives and some terrible negatives. I mean, they're living these filtered lives in a lot of ways. They're connected to much more people than they've ever been able to be connected to before. And they see all the positives and all the negatives of that. Anyone who's a parent of teenage girls will know just how great and how horrible the kind of social connection experience can be. It's a really tough time. But you know what? As employers, you know, their teenage years are teaching them how to be great employees for us. They're going through all their crises much earlier, and it's horrible as parents, but it's great as employers. We've got these tech natives who are crazy connected. They've built a culture of looking after each other because they've had to find a community. And I feel like we've got this opportunity to take all that and do something with it. And, you know, the old school, I remember talking about it a while back, the old school style of management from when I was coming through didn't work for me. And my type of management's probably not going to work for the millennials coming through. I've got to tap into them and figure out what it is that's coming. But if we want a crystal ball for the future, we've got it right in front of us. We just need to have a look at, you know, what they're doing, how they're successful, what works and doesn't work, and really like tap into that. They're digitally connected. They know how to check in. And so the people least, you know, buzzed out when we're all locked down were the people who are already like totally digitally connected. I mean, the people snapping selfies every, 10 seconds. I watch my kids on the way to school. They do 6 Snapchats before we've even dropped off to school. And I'm like, that's they're just living in this digital world where they're completely connected. And Carl makes a really good point. We need to connect face to face. And, I'd be devastated if we didn't do that anymore. But I'm betting the millennials would still kick ass, right? They'd be like, no problem. We've figured out how to build a social community and check in on each other and be connected, even if we can't be physically there. There's a lot we can gain out of that. And so I think there's an opportunity for all of us to really connect with the youngest employees, with the newest people. And the higher up you go, the harder it is to connect with a very new workforce. But if we can do that, we've got a crystal ball.
Yeah.
I think what's happened this year is society's been thrown into this, incredible experiment where, so you wanted flexibility in the workplace to work from home when you want it. Well, here it is. You got it in spades, and suddenly people are going, okay, we're going to have to work from home. And the reality is that, that isolation and just being digitally connected day in, day out is grueling. What I'm hoping happens from here, and we've seen it from a number of tech companies, the most probably notably here in Australia is Atlassian, where they've said, you don't have to come into work if you don't want to, if you want to work from home. But I think what will happen is that like market forces will find the right equilibrium, right? People will determine what works for them. And the reality is that, we won't, I don't think people will generally just work from home in this sort of environment. You need to have that human interaction. I mean, we are social beasts. We need that. Companies that have, there are certain functions within an organization that are perform so much better face to face. And I think we'll find that happier medium, and it'll be a much better outcome, because I mean, I know that back in 2012-13, I was on the federal government's advisory panel for telework. I was advising with 6 other people on policy initiatives to drive telework so that people could, because we're trying to convince business this was a good thing. So 2020 was a year where you did not have a choice, right? So you have to do this to actually stay in business. And I think it's taught people a lot of stuff. So I think next year and going forward, my hope is we come back to a happy medium where people determine how they want to work. I think it'll be really good. I think we'll have some great outcomes. It's not all going to be digital. It'll be a combination, and it'll be a happy medium.
Well said.
I'm with you, Chris. I 100% agree. And this year, there's so many positives with the pure remote work. It flattens the structures. It's actually given us more time to meet with more people. Now, that's come at a price. We're all exhausted, but I've done more skip levels and sort of coalface reviews than ever, and seen more people than I would have, let's say, in an authentic and in-depth interaction than I would have in a corridor. So that's been really good. It's also flattened the world in the region. You got the ability to draw more out of Asia and Americas and EMEA. So that's been good. I think not everybody is responding as well. And, you know, work is less individual work now, it's more teamwork. So some people have struggled in this format, and I definitely concur with Chris that we're going to end up with this hybrid model. I mean, I'm already betting we're going to be 2 or 3 days a week in the office and 2 or 3 days a week from home. And I think that's the way the world will roll for many employers. So I think that where we've got to now, though, in this still quite pure remote world, is that finishing existing projects and programs was pretty effective. Creating new work and new relationships has actually been pretty hard. And I think that's why we're all dying to get back in, because I think there's a lot of energy and ideas. And in some respects, that new work might not be crystallizing as well as when we can get more people together to really make it work.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if something that's come up for me through that conversation is, so there's this differentiation between, let's call them millennials, so the younger generation, and us, for want of a better description, or Gen X. And so how do leaders start to work with the Gen X to start helping them learn to change their thinking or get them to open up to some of the things? Because there's all these wonderful new collaboration tools and all these things that, you know, just getting your head around it. Well, I find it challenging. I'm wide open to it, but many are not. So as leaders moving forward, getting people to understand the value and to open up to thinking differently and being open to this stuff. How do you think we face that?
Well, it's not that.
Can I challenge that a bit, Rebecca? Oh, sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
We don't change them. We have to change. They have an innate compulsion to work a certain way, and that's what's going to make them productive, and they're informing us. And what we have to do is make sure that we give them the platform to be able to execute that way, because it also comes from a period of prosperity. And during periods of prosperity, they feel let down. All right. You know, so they're going to make their own rules. They're going to make their own rules. They're going to come up with ways that they're going to want to communicate. They're already doing it amongst each other, and they're informing us. And what we've got to do is create the environment that allows them to be the most productive and useful that they possibly can. They're going to change the world. They absolutely are. Yeah. And what we've got to do is allow for that platform, allow for that situation, show them where to look, not what to see, get out of their goddamn way and be their biggest fans. Only option we have, as far as I
think we can learn from them as well.
But can I add to what Nick said? I strongly agree with what he said, but I'd also say that the power of empowerment and delegation resonates for me with this conversation as well. As leaders, we have an option. We can empower, we can delegate. But those who do, particularly in this new world, have an opportunity to go even further forward. So why wouldn't we take our most talented and move them up even quicker to get access to the top table? It's not about formally promoting or formally remunerating or formally this or formally that. It's about looking for opportunities where there's a chance to get them involved at something they haven't been involved in previously, and take their energy, ideas, and inspiration and put it to work. What a great message for the organisation it sends to others, that they see the talented move quickly and for the business to benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's another end of the spectrum, which I think we often forget about. So, you know, we've had a lot of conversation, and I kind of poked in that direction as well, about younger people coming up. But actually there's a whole, and if you look at what's happening in COVID, there's a whole generation of much older workers who feel very overlooked. And it can be more challenging for a much older worker to try and step up and do something innovative and interesting and exciting than it is for younger. There is almost this expectation that my young employees are going to come and challenge the norm, and it's exciting to see them at the table. And yet it feels like there's a lot of barriers to much older workers doing the same thing. And we sort of think we're in this kind of middle space, but there are a lot of people who've been around a long time, and there's a habit of for the industry to over-rotate towards the young and forget that there's all this incredible experience out there that we're not tapping into. Think about the last time any of us interviewed. How many older workers were you interviewing? Especially for a more entry-level position. You've got a whole lot of people who are looking to reinvent themselves and are happy to have a crack at it. But we've got this ability, without even thinking about it, to kind of filter out a lot of those people. I think there's a real danger there, particularly, right now when, it's a very, very challenging time to be much older and still want to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And to my point on how do leaders then work with the older people both ends of the spectrum in that sense. So, is it about creating more environments, more opportunities for the different age groups, the different groups to share knowledge, help one another, show one another how, bring value, and almost educate one another on how it might take shape and how they can. I don't know what that I'm just throwing it out there. What can leaders do to create those environments and to get people to open up to new ways of thinking in that sense? Because we're not all going to be sitting in a room, so we could be anyone. It doesn't matter how old we are. Yeah,
you're right there, Beck. I think for me, it's difficult to generalize. It's less about age; it's all about attitude and willingness to be adaptable and to change. If you don't change, they're dead in their corporate career. So, I think if millennials, boomers, X's, if we're not embracing the next generation of tools and platforms, then we're gone. So I think and particularly in the tech industry, and I think most are. I think, as we've said, Australia has pivoted to essentially a digital channel for work quite effectively. Teachers went from classrooms to remote teaching online in the space of a week.
Yeah.
And what a difficult pivot for them. If they can do it, and they were at every end of the generational spectrum, then I think our teams in technology who are leading the charge ought to be embracing it as well and leading by example. So I think, I look at some of our more older workers, seasoned workers, and they've got more energy and ability to change than some of our younger ones. So we've got to be careful on the generalizations, but it's all about that adaptability.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to jump. A comment just came in from Stephen Goodwin on the chat, and he said, perhaps rethink the way we design work and talk strengths before duties, which I like. Yeah. So thank you, Stephen. And so the other thing that comes to mind for me is how we've got these great cultures, is how we talk about how we attract great talent and build these great cultures, and we retain people through great cultures. That's a big shift when we're working in hybrid and different environments. And we can't all congregate around the table tennis at lunchtime and share the spoils that are in the kitchen for breakfast, So how do you think, what are some of the key things you think businesses and leaders are going to need to be doing in terms of attracting the right talent moving forward?
I think just making sure that they feel useful. It's away from that traditional results-oriented, outcome-oriented, based on being part of a movement that makes them feel useful, rather than just doing a task and they're looking for the next job while they're doing that task. Away from that, because everything that happens going forward is about something that is useful. And we're looking at everything at the moment. What doesn't serve us well, and that just creates a whole heap of space and opportunity for that. And not only, the millennials are thinking that way, and they're informing us, and they're basically saying, I need to feel useful. And on the other end of the spectrum, it's a question. Do you want to, or do you have to? You know, if you don't want to work anymore, great, good on you. You know, they just need someone to give them that permission. You know, I'm fine. I want to spend the next 20 years of my life, you know, doing something else, or you know, or whatever. But if I have to, then you've really got to, you know, go back into leadership and say, well, you know, how are you going to feel useful while you're doing that? Because you are competing, and you're competing against everyone else who's wanting to try and make a difference. Wanting to try and make a difference is the big category here, as opposed to, you know, wanting to come and do work.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting. And one of the things I watched your session, Nick, and you know, we've been connected via a supplier-distributor relationship for years and years and years. And one of the things I think you do really well as a leader is you bring your authentic self to work. Like, and you know, there's a lot of talk about authenticity, and it's easier as a leader to do that than it is as an individual contributor. But if you create an environment where someone can bring the real them in and let all their quirks and idiosyncrasies shine through, then they feel part of something, and they feel that them as an individual is a valuable part of your organization. If I create an environment that says you have to be a corporate drone, remember the old days, there's no, I'm not down on IBM now, no disrespect, but there was the IBM blue suit, right? We all wore the same suit, we all looked the same, and you could see from across the street, there's a group of IBMers in a cafe. That's not you. That's the cookie cutter that you want to be. If you allow someone to bring themselves, you know, with all their sort of wonderful quirks, maybe not every single strange one, but with their real personality, then they're comfortable at work. And you've got this culture that says the you that's you is valuable. And I think the people who build teams like that, they build teams that are connected for a long time and survive this kind of stuff. So as we move away from, you know, face-to-face connection, it's finding opportunities. I think Nick calls them opportunities for bliss, but opportunities to connect in a really real way and show off a bit of you, and show off a bit of you that's useful for everybody in their team. That's you know, that kind of culture is, you know, unbreakable. And if you can build that, it kind of lasts through any kind of disruption that is thrown at us.
Yeah,
it does.
What a great team we'd back if we ended up hiring as diverse as we can, not diverse in male, female, diverse as in experiences, backgrounds, values, and created the kind of United Nations that Pat and Nick are referring to. What a powerful statement to the greater community about our leadership, that we're brave enough and have enough guts to go there. I strongly agree with both comments.
Yeah, and that's also, I just think it's exciting, the whole globalization element to this now. Now we know we can work in remote places, where you know, how far can we take that, and who can you bring into your team? So diversity becomes an even bigger opportunity. Chris, how do you think from a startup point of view? I mean, I know people get excited about coming to work for startups. And obviously they go through ups and downs. So, but how do you think this is going to impact their ability to attract and retain good talent?
Yeah, I think in small organizations, founders really set the tone for culture. And so, you know, attracting talent really comes down to often the personality, the behaviors, the values that are set by the founders. From my own experience, you know, when I started Xero in Australia, I had 6 staff. It was a really interesting experiment from the perspective that, you know, here I was out of Microsoft after 15 years, where culture was a really, really big focus for that organization. As big as Microsoft is, it was a massive focus, because they did get it wrong for a while. If you remember back in the late 90s when the US government wanted to split it up based on, you know, anti-competitive behavior, it was all real. They needed to get more customer focused, and that was a huge turnaround. Not easy to change culture for a big company like that. So I sort of witnessed all that, the good and bad of culture. So when I started Xero, you know, it was very much about how I wanted to define that. One little tip that I did, and I'm not necessarily suggesting everyone does this, because, you know, I grew that business to 320 staff over 5 years, but I interviewed every individual. Now, that was not a, you know, an hour-long interview. It was just a check-in. You know, it was just, you know, I'd love to meet, you know, who's, you know, the final checkpoint. For me, it was an opportunity to tell the story, to talk about my vision of creating a company that I wanted to be special, that they could be part of. And I think Nick made a really good point before that, you know, you come to work. My view was that I wanted diversity. I wanted different styles and thinking and all that stuff. But the one thing I wanted was that they were going to bring something to the culture and add to it, that they actually wanted to work there with greater purpose. And it was really interesting, the impact of that. I didn't get to every interview, and there were occasions where I did actually say no, and I'd usually, it drove a conversation with managers in my team about why I felt they weren't right. And it almost always came down to cultural fit. And I wasn't, sometimes I'd get argued down, and that's fine. Like I'd say that's okay, but, this is something I've observed. But it also sent a really powerful message for people coming into the organisation that the CEO actually gave a shit. That I was prepared. Didn't matter what role it was. I was prepared to give up sometimes half an hour, 15 minutes, just to check in, find a little bit about them. Why are you joining? What are your thoughts? Here's where we're going. And it's quite funny because sometimes you get someone who's applying for a support role or an admin role. It's like, I've never been interviewed by the CEO, but it left a lasting impression, I hope. But and it meant for me that I could really have an impact on and stay connected to the culture. It got harder as we got bigger, and I'm not suggesting that every organisation should do that, but it was just one of those little quirks that I decided it was good for me, and I thought it had an impact.
I think that's powerful in a lot of ways in small startup type environments, but then Ken would know you can't, and all of you guys, big businesses would be no way. Yeah.
Can't scale to that, but I think that's a brilliant story, Chris, because that to me is part of the characteristics, and you're setting the tone. What we've been doing this year, this is global, was I love this concept of a conscious culture where we're all being challenged to be more aware of the environment in which we're coming to work. The environment, the characteristics and the behaviours, and actually the lived experience for us as employees. And the lived experience is often really shows up between, you and your direct line manager. So a lot of focus on that. Certainly agree with the work itself needs to be interesting and exciting and linked to a purpose and a mission. But then I think the other thing that we found is the effectiveness, the usefulness of measuring this stuff. Now, it's never centimetre perfect, but employee engagement measures. I've become more a believer in that. And, what's been positive, I think, in most industries this year, I think employee engagement for a lot of firms has actually gone up despite the challenge of the year that we've suffered. So that's pretty exciting. And how but once again, the challenge is how sustainable is it, which is why I think next year we get back into more of a hybrid mode. Not sure how much longer we could persist with the pure remote.
Yeah. I've been talking to a lot of people about engagement, running some engagement surveys moving into next year, and that's it gives you a really real viewpoint, and it gives you somewhere to sort of start from, and it gives you an opportunity to hone in on the survey that I run gives you an opportunity to really hone in on specific areas of disengagement. So it could be the online component, it could be the systems, it could be the leadership, and you can actually hone in on that and do some program work around that. And I just think we've got to get more granular in terms of how we approach things, and measuring is so important moving forward, because we can just go with our gut feel on what we think might be a good idea or what we think might be going on, but we can never really know unless we dig into it. So, I think that's a fantastic point. And we have come to 12:30. I was sad at this point because it's like we've run out of time. So any more comments on that point, because we're going to have to start to wrap up for those who need to leave us. Everybody's done. I'll just check in on the comments again, because I feel like I've neglected the chats a little bit. There's been some fantastic comments, so I'd really urge you to go back and read them if you get time. Silver has said he couldn't agree more. Over the past year during difficult times, he's seen some people respond differently, but the one key thing is that those who are not willing to change or adapt or even accept are falling behind and struggling. So and again, that's giving them some sort of support, I think, to help them shift their thinking or create a different perspective for themselves. And Cameron, totally agree. Creating meaning for your people, co-creating your purpose and accountability as a team. And then I think where we were talking about diversity, he said, cognitive and neurodiversity. Yeah, brilliant. So, yeah, and that's
Hey, Rebecca, you spend a lot of time thanking all of us, but I think thank you for giving us an opportunity to connect with a bunch of people. You're developing a bit of a cult following on LinkedIn, big LinkedIn influencer. So big shout out to you. You've created a bit of a brand here, and I think we're all really excited to be part of it. So thanks for having us on. Really appreciate it.
Such a rock
Well
star.
said, Pat. We all, none of us wanted to miss the party. We're riding on Beck's coattails here.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I feel very privileged to be able to pull this together, and I'm really grateful. And I think it's of huge value to the people who are watching, to get some really, some real experience and some real insights. And so I thank you to everybody who's watched and everybody who's been involved. Merry Christmas if I don't talk to you. Just so you know, next week I have a wonderful woman by the name of Merle Singer coming on. Merle has been running a research project with Deakin on, it's actually around leadership and millennials. So we'll be having a session on that next week at 11:30. So I'd love anyone to join us if they're interested. I am putting together a document that covers a lot of what we have spoken about today in terms of tips for leaders moving forward and some of the things that they could potentially be thinking about and doing to really, strive in 2021 for success, both from a cultural perspective and from a results perspective. So if anyone would like a copy of that, please let me know. I will try and pick up anyone who's been on this and send something to them. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Nergui. Thank you to everybody. Marcello, hi. Sorry I missed that earlier. That's it from me. Anybody else got any final parting comments? All right.
Well done. That was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I am going to end the live here. All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.